English tap water. So firstly, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure the title piqued quite a lot of interest. It's basically the marketing equivalent of the philosophy question of what is the meaning of life. What I do want to do before we really kick off is just sort of manage your expectations. I'm not going to be rounding off this webinar with the insights equivalent of this is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. But hopefully you will feel more confident about having the ability to find the places where your insights come from and how to make the most of them. We hope you'll find it interesting. It's a point of view. I think we need to make that clear. It's our point of view, but it is born of many years' experience and with many, many successes and a few failures on the way, but that sort of holds true to our philosophy of the paradox of success is that at first you have to fail. So those failures have proved that we are learning from our experiences and we are moving in the right direction. This happened last time. This is the technical glitch. Now, first off, just a tiny bit of sort of history lesson, framing where we're coming from. This chart is titled The Optimist's Belief System. Ultimately, this is pretty much how we go about finding insights right now. We go into the field, we prod and we probe, and we hope they're waiting to pick to these wonderful insights. And we hope that they will fall into our open arms, and year after year we assume that because it was okay last year, there'll be a bumper crop this year. Sorry, this is very dull. There we go. The problem is that we have been doing the same thing for far too long. So just to pick up on the visual metaphor here, the harvests are dwindling, the fields are drying up, and again, just sort of following through this imagery, if you imagine that in any given year, if a crop fails, the demand for that crop remains high, but supply is low, and that artificially pushes the price up, and that means that the thinner pickings are commanding a higher price. So in effect, you're paying more for something that isn't really all that good, and it's very similar with insights. If there are thin pickings in the world of insights, the tall dwarf is still the one that's head and shoulders above the rest, but it's still not a great insight. And this is where I reference boiling frogs. There's an apocryphal story, which I am told does border on the truth, which is basically if you drop a frog into boiling water, it will panic and it will try and clamber out. So that would be, for example, if suddenly there was nothing out there were no insights we could find, we'd panic and we'd find new ways of doing it. However, what we have is this situation, which is if you pop a frog into cold water and slowly heat it up, the frog will sink into a tranquil stupor, and it will slowly and unresistingly allow itself to be boiled to death. And that's pretty much where we are. The situation is changing. It's changing gradually. We're not really aware that it's changing, but actually it is getting to be very dangerous. And we've got to find ways of sort of asking ourselves, how can we stop ourselves sort of slipping into this situation? And unfortunately, as is often the case, there is no easy way. Another visual analogy here, you might be sort of beginning to see that one of the things that we do use quite a lot at Brainjuicer is this idea of storytelling. It's very easy to reference something else and sort of borrow all the pre-existing knowledge about that. And here we've got this idea of panning for gold. I mean, ultimately, people go out there. It's a lot of work. Most of the time, you can eke a living. You can sort of get by. Quite often you hit little. You sort of find little nuggets of gold in there, but it's very, very rare that you really hit big. And that means that it's a bit of a gamble. It's doubly so when you think that the biggest single contributing factor to new product failure is poor consumer insight. In his paper in 2001, R.G. Cooper wrote, "A lack of thoroughness in identifying real needs in the marketplace or in spotting early signs of competitors girding up to take the offensive is often the finding in a new product post-mortem. So basically, if you don't do the due diligence, if you don't fully understand what the consumer landscape is, you're taking a huge gamble, and you're taking a risk with your organization's future. So here we talk about a rigorous approach. Now, when you see something like this, you think, all right, here we go. It's quantitative. It's making sure that we've got all our all our eggs in a basket, all our ducks in a row, all those sort of metaphors. But actually, what we're talking about here is that insights generation actually isn't about research. What it is about is using research to feed a creative process, because our assertion is that insights generation is actually a creative task. It's not this touchy-feely, oh, isn't that lovely creativity. This is the applied creativity that you would find in industrial design or in architecture or in advertising. And this actually works best within a structure. These rules and structure help improve the creative process. They don't stymie it, they don't limit our options. What they do is make sure that we can review what we're doing within a proper framework. And this structure, this rule book, is something that I'd like to share now. So as I said earlier, this isn't about giving you the answers. This is about sort of helping give you a formula to identify the best answers for you, so that you can go out and do this. And basically, it's just picking up on that Chinese proverb of, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. So what I've done here is I've just broken it down into a number of jobs. There are 8 jobs, or 8.5 jobs in fact, and we need to look at all of these if we're going to improve our chance of success. And the first one is just this wonderful quote by this chap called Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was one of those annoying polymaths who sort of was a little bit of a philosopher. He was a doctor, he was a raconteur, he was a writer, he was a philanthropist in the US in the 1800s, and he just had this lovely this lovely phrase: "It is the province of wisdom to speak, and it is the privilege. Sorry, it is the province of knowledge to speak, and it is the privilege of wisdom to listen." And I think the key thing there is that we spend way too much time talking to people. In fact, worse than that, we spend way too much time talking at people. And if we're talking, then we're hearing our voices rather than theirs. And the thing is, even when they do talk, they're merely responding to our questions. So we're not really allowing ourselves the opportunity to listen to them. We make gestures in that direction, but we don't actually really follow it through. And also, listening goes beyond just listening to the things that are said. The real skill here lies in being able to interpret what wasn't said or what was nearly said. Claude Debussy said that music is more about the spaces between the notes than the notes themselves, and I think this is hugely important in our context. Now, I've come from a world of offline qualitative, so many times was doing viewed focus groups, and I've really lost count of the number of times I've been challenged with the classic, but I didn't hear that, and my response is usually, well, that's actually because they didn't say it. And I'm not being flippant or arrogant here. This is simply an integral part of the human condition. We only hear what we're hoping to hear or expecting to hear, and we decode what we hear in a way that best fits these notions. This is called the curse of knowledge. We can't unknow what we know, and what this actually means is that if we have some thoughts, some hypotheses in our head, we are naturally more predisposed to hear the things that chime with our hypotheses, rather than being egalitarian and letting all the thoughts wash over us. So we have to learn to sort of try and park our preconceived notions. Not hugely easy, but it's a skill that one has to learn. Job 2 is isn't hire Donald Rumsfeld for international relations. It is about making sure that we learn to ask questions that we didn't even know we needed to ask. And there's this great quote here, which basically for me is a parallel to the research universe. There are no knowns. These are things that we know we know. For example, in a survey last year, 42% of males aged between 24 and 35 did not eat breakfast. So let's go out this year and find what that number is now. So we're exchanging one known for another known. The known unknowns are basically where there's a gap in our knowledge and we want to plug that gap, but we're determining what that gap is. So for example, we know that 42% of males aged 24 to 35 do not eat breakfast, but we don't know why. So why don't we design a study that will help us fill this knowledge gap? So there we are looking from our citadel out, and we're seeing that there's a gap. The unknown unknowns I couldn't even give you an example on because we just don't know. This is where we allow ourselves the freedom to take a trip into their world and see what occurs, and that's when they are just guiding us around their space that we encounter these issues, that we come across these things that will help us ask the questions that when we started off we didn't even know that we needed to ask. Job 3. Job 3 is hugely important but incredibly difficult, which is this idea of when we go into the consumer landscape, we always leave a mark. The minute we open our mouths, we're reframing their context. So, for example, if we ask a question, what do you like best about brand X? Immediately they're having not only to think about brand X, but what is best about it. Now, in truth, they may have no opinion at all about brand X, but because we've asked a question, they feel compelled to answer. People feel it's rude to say, oh, I don't know, and there's rarely an option, well, certainly I've never seen one, that says don't care, which might actually be what they're thinking. And I think what we have to remember is that ultimately these people, the people who are responding to our research surveys, basically they've entered into a contract to answer our questions more often than to shed light on their world. And I suppose a simple parallel here is just to imagine that if you are measuring the tire pressure, when you put the valve on, air is released from the tire into the measuring device, and so therefore you're altering the dynamic. By simply trying to measure something, you have changed it. And job 4 is a definition more than a job, but it's something that we need to really understand, which is we can acquire knowledge until the sun implodes, but knowing stuff doesn't necessarily mean knowing what to do with it. The key thing here is about using knowledge to create understanding. Understanding is pin sharp, whereas knowledge is scattergun. And if we simply gorge ourselves on knowledge morning, noon and night, all we do is know more stuff. And then what do you do about it? So the key thing is, yes, it's important to have this sort of divergent approach to collecting knowledge, but it's even more important to be able to take the scalpel to that and fashion it into something that you can use and that is proof that you have understood the thing that you need to understand. Job 5, this is one of my favorite pictures, and if any of you are ever witness to another one of my presentations, there is a good chance that this one will be in again. The thing I'm trying to get across here is that it's so important to stay curious. As we become more experienced, we become less experimental. The rules and the frameworks and the protocols and the politics sort of tend to squish our curiosity. So, for example, if we see a shoe, our experience tells us that it's going to smell possibly in a rather unpleasant way. So we're not going to go there because we are telling ourselves, no need to go there, I already know. We don't really give our chance to find out if maybe it's different. And even if it is smelly, we don't allow ourselves to refresh that. We are sort of simply relying on previous experience. We've already made our minds up. And that's, that experience over experimentation leads to a situation of diminishing returns, because ultimately we run back to the things that we are familiar with rather than embracing the experimentation and the adventure. And job 6, really, this is a sort of fairly standard one, but one that is a problem in the industry. I used to work in qualitative research, and even there, where we think, you know, it's freer thinking, qualitative, we can go here and there. In truth, we can't, because there are lots of questions that need to be asked. There is a limited time frame, and there is a dictated agenda. Yes, there are ways of not asking the direct, but they're not out there enough. And we need to find ways of being able to be more oblique and still manage the issues that need to be managed. We're not talking about wanton chaos here and stepping away from the brief and saying, well, we decided not to ask that because we couldn't be bothered and we decided it wasn't really all that important. It's just about there being a time and a place and giving people the opportunity to let us into their lives and see what really matters to them, rather than being dogmatically fixated by the need to stay focused on our agenda. A story I usually tell at this point, and I'm going to say it now, is there's a film called Beaches. It stars Bette Midler. I've never seen it, but I do know this quote. And this, to me, epitomizes how brands typically talk to consumers, especially in the market research context. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think about me? In a way, it goes back to the thing earlier about making people think about brand X when they might even not want to. And job 7, just so you know, this is actually a true answer from a maths test. One of the things I love about this is it is epically simple, totally correct, and wonderfully brave. And I think if we as marketeers could aspire to those components, we'd all be in a good place. What I'm trying to get across here is this issue of quite often we almost feel the need to overcomplicate things. You know, sometimes consumers say things and they're wonderfully simple and they really nail it, and yet we still feel compelled to take it away and code it. And we're sort of our own worst enemies when we do that, because then we need to chaperone the findings around our own organizations in order to make people other people understand the things that we see in this. Whereas if we'd actually stayed true to what was originally said, anyone could get it. And the last of these jobs is by far and away the most important. It's just keep asking why. Never stop asking why. It's something that we start doing the second that we get a request for a proposal. It's like, why is this important? Why do you think that we need to do that? And it's not us being argumentative. Partially it's us so that we, if we are going to be acting as your agents on this project, we need to understand. And also it's to see if there might be better ways. You know, it's not done in a combative fashion, but it is a way that we need to really understand. So why is it that you feel you need to know this? You know, are there other things that we could do instead? So, and I think, you know, what we need to sort of remember here is that sort of constant thirst for knowledge and understanding that young children have, and the way that they could make any parent's head completely come off with the level and frequency of why. But it's something that, you know, again, maybe it's the whole experience over experimentation. We seem to lose the way to be able to do that. So those are some jobs. As I said, it's not about giving people the answers, but it's about understanding the things that we should and could do. And in truth, yeah, some of them are a stretch, but they're all doable. This isn't about, you know, landing people on the moon. So now we come to the point. Well, we've talked through that. So how can we help? Well, the thing is, Brainjuice came at this after many years of actually being involved in insights validation. And through that validation work, we've seen what works and what doesn't, and we've done a lot of analysis on this. And we were becoming very frustrated that more don't seem to work than do. And so we thought we'd see if we could do better. So we started building an approach that would allow us to factor in jobs 1 through 8 with the hope that we could improve the odds of success. And one of the key things that we think and hope that we provide is clarity. And the first thing is that we've actually got a very clear definition of what an insight is. Now, we all know many people have tried to define what an insight is, and we've probably all heard something like, it's a fresh, penetrating truth that resonates and excites people. But these definitions really miss the mark. Any definition should seek to convey a moment of emotional connection, because that's what insight writers need to be aiming at. It's that moment of connection when you say to yourself, wow, yeah, you understand me almost better than I understand myself. That's what we need to set our sights on. And this is precisely the definition that we use at Brainjuicer. Wow, yes, you understand me almost better than I understand myself. And an important thing there is that this is an insight written from a consumer's point of view. It's the emotional connection that they feel, and it's the thing that comes from them rather than comes from the business or the brand. And so basically we have got this structure. Yes, it's another structure, and we've been able to create on the back of this approaches which allow us to work towards helping you build winning insights. And these winning insights we now coin spring sights. And this is an insight so good that it takes the brand somewhere new. Sadly, there are very few spring sights in the world. Of the 4,000 or so insights that we've tested, less than 1 in 5 would class as a spring sight. Roughly an equal number would be classed as adequate, and then we have a great big fat number of what are rather sadly coined as thin sights. They sort of they're the damp lettuce equivalent of the insights world, and because of all this work that we've done and the fact that we have seen what works and what doesn't, and the fact that on the back of that we have developed some ways of addressing it, this has actually given some clarity of purpose. It's like, okay, so what can we do to try and make this better? And the thing that we came up with is actually creating a guarantee. And that guarantee is based on, if you come to us and we work through one of the number of approaches that we have to develop insights, to generate insights on your behalf, we will then articulate them working with you, and then we will validate them. And our guarantee is that if we don't get you a winning insight, an insight that will be classed within the top 19%, then we'll just do it again, and we will keep on doing it until we get to the place where we know we have a spring sight. Now, this is the only bar chart that you will see from me today, but we've been talking about insights, but I think it's very important that we actually put it in the context of how these insights are used. And basically what this chart shows is how those insights which were rooted, those concepts which were rooted in a validated insight had significantly higher potential than the concepts that weren't. So this isn't just sort of nice, oh, it's great, we've got these wonderful insights. These insights actually help drive thought through the building and help cut back that gamble and increase the odds of, because ultimately, you know, it's not about, no one is in the business of making winning insights. People are in the business of making winning products and services. And that's the gamble that's being taken if they're not based on winning insights. So where do we start? Well, about just over 3 years ago, we started with online communities. These are online forum where we chat with people and let their stories play out over time. They're not the always-on branded communities. These are communities built around a specific need with a specific audience. But as with their bigger brothers and sisters, these communities provide a far more natural environment for discourse and exploration. And as I said, I came from a traditional qualitative background, and you know, these focus groups can become a bit of a feeding frenzy, and the clock's ticking, and you've still got questions you need to ask. The lovely thing about the online community sort of platform is the conversations just play out over time. It could be 2 or 3 weeks. We can sit back and listen to what's happening. We can lean forward and drive conversations. And there's a very natural flow. It's sort of almost like akin to a dinner party. The conversation will start in one place and will meander around, but there will be a cohesive thread running through it. And because these stories are playing out over time, there is a natural sense of evolution rather than it just being sort of people rushing to get something said. But I think what should definitely be remembered is the fact that although this is an online platform, if you look at the Pareto principle, this is sort of 20-80, and 20 is the platform. 80% of this is the human skills of analysis, interpretation, storytelling, and enthusiasm. And as I said, we manage these conversations over a matter of weeks, and that lets discussions evolve. And I think what's very important about that is it means that we can develop thinking on the go. If we are working with a marketing communications agency, for example, they can see what's going on. There's complete transparency, and we can create hypotheses, and we can put stimulus in that has been developed literally on the go and feed it back into the community and see, do these people, do they see where this idea has come from? Have we taken the seed of their thinking and destroyed it, or have we built on it? And it's a wonderful way of allowing everyone in, because everyone can sort of have access rights to see how these stories emerge and why consumers are saying what they're saying. It's not a black box methodology. It's not heavily subjected towards the sort of moderator bias or anything like that. And yes, questions still need to be asked, but we can be very sparing in the way that we ask these questions. So we're not treading too heavily through the virgin snow of consumers. But last year we wanted to take it a step further. We wanted to go further into this wonderful world of not asking questions, rather perversely taking the research out of research. And our thinking behind this was that basically whenever you ask a question, even if someone thinks they're being sort of viscerally honest with you, there is a good chance that they're versioning the truth. They may not know it, but they might be thinking, will it make me look silly if I don't answer this way? Will they think badly of me if I say this or that? And ultimately, if there is a question there, a version of the truth is presented that creates the best fit. So we have what we call these digivisuals. These are our research robots. And they don't ask questions, so how can there be any lies? And basically, these digivisuals are digital personas who can represent a segment, they can represent a brand or a trend, and they exist in the social media. And basically what they do is we program them with keywords that are relevant to whatever it is that we're trying to describe. And this digital persona goes out and brings back to us and creates its own blog, brings back to us a load of stuff that could have been said or done or seen or heard or played by the kind of person that we're talking to. And in effect, our digivisual will be made up of possibly 1,500 individuals. So it's a form of web ethnography. It allows us to observe behaviors and encounters without actually having to interfere in their world at all. And one of the ways that digivisuals is most used at the moment is in segmentation. And what we have here is sort of two pictures. One picture is supposed to represent a two-dimensional image, and the other picture is supposed to represent a three-dimensional image. And the reason we've got this here is when you do segmentation, basically it does necessarily flatten people. Whichever way you look at it, if you move slightly to the left of that picture on the left or slightly to the right, it's still presenting the same information to you, and there's nothing that you can do to alter that. Whereas with the picture on the right, you can the statue, you can walk around that, and you will start to see nuances and slightly different things, and you are seeing a person as a three-dimensional entity rather than a two-dimensional biopsy. And another lovely thing here is the fact that we can walk around this statue, but also our clients can, and they will see different things because they might start the journey in a slightly different place. And our view is that everyone has a legitimate point of view. It isn't a case of, here's our survey, go off and do with it what you will. Another thing that we're developing right now is the idea of behavioral economics. And this basically is just, again, picking up on this idea of people versioning the truth, or people, as we quite often say at Brain Juice, of being unreliable witnesses to their own selves. By giving people these lenses that behavioral economics can give us, we can enable them to see through their eyes, but in a slightly different way. So just to explain that, basically, when you look at the environment that people are in, there are four sort of environmental issues that would impact on this. There's the local environment, the physical surroundings, the choice environment. These are sort of external factors to individual thought processes, so i.e. what choices are available. There are social factors that we take into account, the peer group pressure, we are societal beings. And there are also the sort of the individual elements, and all of these, if you ask a person just to disconnect themselves from the morass of choices that they could make and look at things through the choice environment, for example, they start to see things in a slightly different way. And we create the picture by having other people in the same research study who are looking at things from each of the sort of the four different perspectives. We've successfully used this in online communities. We've used it in offline environments, and we're beginning to apply these principles to ethnography, which is the next thing that I want to talk about. And basically, ethnography has always been a very difficult issue. It's very time heavy. It's always a very, very small sample, and ultimately it raises more questions than it answers, and that's what it's designed to do. We've recently started working with a company called Ethos, and what they have done is develop a mobile smartphone app which basically allows them to have an ethnographer in their pocket. So we can run multi-country studies, we can capture data 24/7, and I think one of the very interesting things about this form of people being able to feed information back to us, and they can send us video, they can send us still pictures, they can send us text, they can send us voice memos, all with geolocation tagging, is that because their phone is something that they're used to sharing very intimate details with, they very quickly forget that there is a spy in the cab. So we get these moments of absolute candor and honesty that even traditional there's an ethnographer in the room studies wouldn't get to. And what we're also doing is actually using this device to skill up people so they become co-researchers. We look at ways that they can take the skills that we can share with them, because it's relatively simple, and we can see things through their eyes rather than everything coming back to us. And again, this is quite exciting because there are sort of these wonderful moments of naivety which absolutely nail the moment, and the only reason we're getting that naivety is because they don't know that they're supposed to say something very flash. Now, all this that I've been talking about is about sort of discovering these things, but very importantly is how do you turn it into an insight? An insight has to exist as a set of words. And there's this quote by Blaise Pascal: "I've made this letter longer than usual only because I have not had the time to make it shorter." And I think quite often we forget that we spend a lot of time and energy trying to understand the thing, and then we don't have the time and energy to actually make that thing exist in its optimal form. And recently we've been doing quite a lot of insights articulation for clients, and we started running workshops to help clients understand how they might be able to maximize the potential of any given thought. And as ever in these things, at the end there's some lessons. I mean, this one I think is particularly interesting. you may remember that for years, in fact, all the way back in 1989, BA launched its slogan, "The World's Favorite Airline." They had to drop it in 2001 because Lufthansa had actually overtaken them in passenger numbers. But rather scarily, this statistic comes from 2006, so they're still clinging dearly to this internal piece of data. It's almost as though they've lost their ability to look outside. Basically, not only is this thought unsustainable, it's actually already well past its sell-by date. But just picking up on this idea of insights being sustainable, simply finding one doesn't necessarily mean that that is your gateway to the sort of the higher levels of consumer understanding in perpetuity. Even sustainable insights need to be sustained. And that's what we have here. Dove, going back to 2003, I think. Interestingly, I've been talking mainly about qualitative. This was actually a stat that popped out of some quantitative work, where a piece of research found that 72% of women felt bad about themselves after reading a woman's magazine. Now, rather than someone just say, well, that's experience, of course that's the case, someone actually thought, no, let's just experiment with this, let's see where this takes us. And they turned their back on what the cosmetics industry did, and they came up with an insight. For years and years, the beauty industry seems to have set out to make women feel bad about themselves for their own commercial ends. Wouldn't it be great if there was a brand that celebrated women as they really are? And this acted for the springboard for the campaign for Real Beauty. It increased Dove's market share by 36% in the US, and similar sort of increases in other markets. Very importantly, when they came around to brand valuation, that simple insight, because it is simple, because anyone can understand it, was seen to account for basically 32% of Dove's global value. So always nice to get a French philosopher in. In terms of a way forward, what I suppose we've been trying to talk about today is this idea that Proust's lovely sort of lovely encapsulation here. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. So I think what we have to remember is that we just need to look at things slightly differently. And the bizarre thing here is that when we don't have our brand hat on, we look at everything else through new eyes because we're a consumer. But strangely enough, the minute we put our brand hat on, we start to think our brand is perceived in entirely different ways. So a very important point there. And then finally, just coming back to this this point of making things less of a gamble, bringing people to the wonderful world of spring sites. I mentioned earlier about this guarantee of bringing a winning insight, bringing a spring site to your door. This would be something that we could do with you through our generation process, the articulation process, and the insights validation process, which I haven't talked about today, but if you'd like to know more about that, we can send through information. And that will be something that will act as proof that we are not just talking the talk, that these theories, we're actually happy to put some substance behind. And again, a closing thought. I put this in because I love the simplicity of this. I love this idea of how something so wonderfully powerful can be so amazingly simple. And this is about the essence of feeling. This is about sort of connecting with emotions rather than simply being representative and representational and playing back what do you see. And that is me done. So that's who I am. I will now ask Anna to step in.
Hello.
And see if there are any questions. Hi, Anna.
Hi. Yeah, there's quite a few questions we've got. I think if we start off with questions from Beth in the US. You've been talking about a lot about consumer insights. Could you also talk a bit about business-to-business insights, especially in the changing economic environment? How do you feel talking about applies
uh,
there?
call me old-fashioned, but business people are humans. They are consumers. I did an awful lot of work in business to business when I was in the offline qual space. Ultimately, it's still about finding those connections. It is still about not being direct. And I think even more so in business to business than in consumer, there's a sense that people need to project an image of I'm on top of this and I have an opinion and I'm in a certain position. I think this is the right way to do things. I think it behooves us even more in the B2B space to be slightly more disingenuous and actually finding ways of sort of making sure that we aren't faced with the usual suspects when it comes to responses. But ultimately, you know, it is about understanding who these people are and finding out the ways that we can get behind the presented superficial.
Great, thanks. Probably just to move slightly differently towards, in terms of just the specification of what you're talking about. So I've got a question of what's exactly the difference between insights and behavior, would you say?
Behavior is something that you observe. Insight is how you take that observed behavior and build towards a desired solution.
Also, we've got a question from Natalie. Is there something you could help to explain a bit more about how the smartphone app works, and specifically about concerns regarding consumer privacy? So detail about the kind of information that we can actually capture and how that's captured.
There are no issues with privacy because they're entering into this of their own free will. Last I heard, the Market Research Society Code of Conduct didn't allow you to brainwash people, but I'm always happy to go there. Again, it's quite interesting because people will slowly open the door to you. And the way that we design the programs is that to start off with, it is sort of softly, and then we don't push them to take us further into our lives. They just pull us in. And this is because, you know, it's something that it isn't intrusive. We are not constantly cajoling them. And as I mentioned earlier, because the device works, or the app, the way that we collect this information about these people works via something that they're incredibly familiar with, they very quickly forget. The specifics of the app, I can send you some information on that, but literally it will allow someone at any time to capture through any of the capture devices that the smartphone has what they're doing, who they're with, what they're seeing. You know, for example, if we wanted to know, you know, someone was we're doing a project, say for dog food, and we wanted to know, well, you know, when you're shopping the category, where do you go to first? You look around, and they can literally film and give us a narration of what they're doing. But ultimately, because again, as with online communities, it is just a tool. It is just something that we use that allows our qualitative researchers and anthropologists and ethnographers and semioticians to look into and start understanding things better.
Great. Another question about insights in terms of actually specifying the kind of the type of insight they are. So would you say they're always the same for individual products and for a company or image or a brand, or are there kind of lower level and high level insights for business lines and then higher level ones for a company?
It depends. I mean, there will be you can. One of the ways that we look at it is rather than higher level and lower level, because that sounds as though the lower level is just going to be rubbish, is you can look at insights platforms. So the things that might act as springboards to more tightly focused insights. Without wanting to sound glib, I don't really know until you get there, and that's the lovely thing about if you do adhere to the what we're looking at is the unknown unknowns. What we're looking at is getting answers to the questions we didn't know we needed to ask. To be prescriptive about where we might end up is it's a falsehood. But yes, you could possibly, and we have seen it, you could possibly end up where there are layers and you just need to be very clear that the rationale, the raison d'etre for these layers is clearly explained, so that there isn't any danger that this kind of insight, for example, one of the classic things is, some are marketing communications insights and some are product insights. If you mix them up, you might go in all kinds of awful places. Sometimes you can actually take those insights and then work them up to levels like, is there an all-embracing brand insight? As I said right at the start of this sort of mini diatribe, it's difficult to know until you actually take that first step.
Got a couple of questions about specific methodology. So one is actually about combinations. So have we actually used ethnography activities among the online communities we've mentioned?
Yes.
Or other combinations?
Our view is the answer is yes. Now what's the question? So basically, because we are we act to sort of a solutions level rather than a methodology level, we will look at what is required and we will design a program that will best fit those needs. We have mixed ethnography with communities. We tend not to do it at we won't have people in a community who are also doing ethnography at the moment anyway. What we tend to do at the moment is lead with an ethnography stage which helps us identify these unknown unknowns, and then we will have a workshop that makes it a sort of better place to move forward into an online community. We have used online communities to help us design and then build and reflect on digivisuals. So in effect what we've done, if we feel that people are going to find it difficult to actually talk about themselves, we've created this third person persona who in effect is an externalized version of them, and then they're quite happy to talk about themselves because they're talking about this other entity. We have mixed focus groups with communities. As I say, it entirely depends on what the needs of the sort of the project are.
And kind of tying into that, do you think you could ever say, is there a best methodology for collecting insights?
No.
Yeah. So you can kind of use a combination of things.
Yeah, I mean, I was chatting to someone. He was listening to the webinar this morning, and we're talking about new and innovative ways of looking at pack design. Last week we did some phenomenal work on pack design using focus groups. It was just the right thing to do. This isn't necessarily about reinventing the wheel and being at the bleeding edge of innovation. It's what works best, and making sure that within our quiver we have enough arrows to sort of hit all the targets.
In terms of global insights, I've got a question from Lisa. It's heard the comment that insights are universal around the world. Would you agree with this?
No, they're not universal around the world until you've tested them around the world. If, however, you do a project that, for example, you are doing an online community, you're doing some insights generation work and it covers off a number of markets. One thing is for sure is that the insights that well up out of those markets are true for those markets. One could say, well, these markets are emblematic and therefore we can scale up the work that we did, say, in Vietnam for Southeast Asia. The work that we did in Germany is symbolic of Western Europe. You can sort of extrapolate out of these things. But ultimately, the only way to really know is to actually test them in those markets. And the best way is to generate them. And the idea here is you would look at each of the markets individually, and then we would be the ones who would have a helicopter view and see, is there a linking thought? Is there a big theme that will embrace all the shades of opinion that we've encountered, and will that work at a highest global level, or will it be one of these awful global averages? Again, you need to test these things, but to say that as an overall statement is misleading.
I think we've got one more question to go. To kind of go back to how we at Brainjuice to do things, in terms of qualitative insight generation, can we just confirm, do we use quantitative research to kind of synthesize both qual and quant in order to come up with kind of a mega insight?
Oh yeah, I mean we will use the UNA. I mean there are all sorts of ways, like I said earlier, all sorts of ways of getting at this. Just say yes. Now what is it that you really need? In fact, quite often an awful lot of the initial thinking is sitting there in quant. And for example, the Dove example, that rose out of a piece of quantitative work. This isn't sort of us having clear lines of demarcation between qual does generation and quant does evaluation. It doesn't work like that. It is about what's the job that we need to do here, what information is to hand, and how can we build on that and take us to the better place.
I think that ties in. We've got a question about, in terms of, it's not just new insights, but also renewing insights that have already been found, and to kind of validate those. That's kind of a thing where we definitely use quant for that as well.
Yeah.
And qual. I think that's pretty much all we've got time for. So maybe just to say, we're quite happy to get feedback over email. As you said, Chris, you've got your email address there, and there will be an email sent through to attendees just to recap other contact details for our marketing teams. So if you do have any other questions to come out of that, then please do contact us. Very happy to talk about anything, any other concerns you might have, or any interest that you might have in what we talked about.
And yes, thank you very much for giving us a chunk of your Tuesday afternoon. Hope you found it enjoyable, and we look forward to hearing any follow-up questions that you may have. I will be signing off now. Goodbye.
The organizer